What if I told you that the United States fought its first overseas war in North Africa? Well, it did. And this wasn't some special conflict either. This was a full-blown war with major battles and campaigns and everything. So what was this strange conflict all about? Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about the Barbary Wars between the years of 1801 to 1815. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any awesome episodes. The Barbary Wars were the first overseas war for the United States Navy. They were fought against the Barbary pirates who sailed out of North Africa and harassed shipping both in the Mediterranean Sea and along the Atlantic coast of the Americas. The United States had been in several conflicts with Native Americans since its founding, but these wars were the first time that the US would fight against a foreign government. These wars would have a profound impact on the young Navy, as it established America's dominance at sea in the Western Mediterranean. It would also greatly expand the size and strength of the Navy, as well as develop naval tactics that were used in later major conflicts, like the War of 1812 and the American Civil War. So let's get into it. In order to understand the Barbary Wars, we have to first talk about piracy. Piracy is nothing new. It has been around since there have been ships. But during the 1700s, two regions of the world dominated the trade in piracy. One was the Caribbean and the other was the Mediterranean. As the American colonies grew, they became more reliant on shipping to move goods, and this made them targets for pirates. The most notorious of these pirates were the Barbary pirates, who were based out of North Africa. Their base of operations was the Maghreb region, which consists of modern-day Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. There were many different groups of Barbary pirates, but they all shared one common goal: to plunder the riches of the Mediterranean. What made these pirates so dangerous was their use of fast and maneuverable ships called galleys. These ships were perfect for the shallow waters of the Mediterranean and allowed the pirates to easily escape from their enemies. In addition to their use of galleys, the Barbary pirates were also very well armed. They carried cannons on board their ships that could easily sink merchant vessels, and once they had captured a ship, the pirates would loot it for valuables and then either sell the survivors or take them back to their home country for ransom. One of the most successful groups of Barbary pirates was the Regency pirates. They were based out of Algiers and were known for their brutality. At one point, the Dey of Algiers, who was the leader of the Regency pirates, even held 300 hostages in his palace while he negotiated with European governments for their release. He demanded 36 million silver dollars, which was an enormous sum of money at the time. The Dey was willing to kill all of the hostages, rather than release them for less than the full amount. In the end, the Europeans paid the ransom and all of the hostages were released. As you can imagine, attacks by the Barbary pirates were very lucrative. It was not uncommon for a single pirate ship to capture a merchant vessel and crew and then demand a ransom for their release. The amount of the ransom often depended on the value of the cargo that had been seized. The pirates would typically hold on to the cargo until they had received the ransom money. As attacks by the Barbary pirates increased, the American government began to take notice. Early on, the United States relied on other European powers to protect its shipping in the Mediterranean. However, as tensions rose between the United States and the Barbary states, this was no longer an option. President Thomas Jefferson decided that the United States needed to take matters into its own hands and establish its own naval presence in the Mediterranean. On July 4, 1801, the United States declared war on the Barbary states. The following day, the United States Navy began its first overseas deployment. A squadron of 4 warships, the USS Constitution, the USS Argus, the USS Vixen, and the USS Siren sailed from Boston to the Mediterranean. The squadron was commanded by Commodore Richard Dale. Its mission was to protect American shipping from the Barbary pirates. The American squadron arrived in the Mediterranean in the fall of 1801. They were met with a mixed reception. The Dey of Tunis was eager to make peace with the Americans, but the other Barbary states were less cooperative. The Americans were attacked by the Tripolitans and the Regency pirates. Despite being outnumbered, the Americans were able to defend themselves and protect American shipping. In 1803, the United States signed a treaty with the Dey of Tunis that granted American ships the right to travel through the Mediterranean without being attacked. This was a major victory for the Americans, as it opened up trade with the Ottoman Empire. The treaty also provided for the release of any American prisoners held by the Tunisians in exchange for a ransom. While the Americans were having success against the Tunisians, they were having more difficulty against the Tripolitans. In 1803, the Dey of Tripoli declared war on the United States. The war was short-lived, as the Americans were able to defeat the Tripolitans decisively. On August 3, 1805, the USS Constitution captured the USS Siren, which was the flagship of the Tripolitan Navy. With the capture of the Siren, the Tripolitans sued for peace, and the war was over. By the end of 1805, the Barbary Wars were effectively over. The United States had established itself as a major naval power in the Mediterranean. The American Navy had grown from just 4 ships in 1801 to 25 ships in 1805. In addition, the Navy had gained valuable experience in fighting against a major power. The sailors and officers of the United States Navy had proven themselves to be equal to the challenge. They had defeated the Tripolitans and established peace with the Tunisians. But there was still one major threat to American shipping: the Regency pirates. The United States continued to maintain a naval presence in the Mediterranean after the Barbary Wars officially ended in order to keep the Regencies at bay. However, this did not stop the Regencies from attacking American shipping. In 1811, the Regencies captured an American ship off the coast of Algeria. This was seen as a violation of the peace treaty between the two countries. President James Madison asked Congress for permission to declare war on Algeria. Congress declared war, and the United States Navy went back to war against the Barbary pirates. This war was even shorter than the last one. On June 26, 1815, an American squadron led by Commodore Stephen Decatur captured and destroyed the USS Argus. This was the flagship of the Algerian Navy. With the destruction of the Argus, the Algerians sued for peace, and the war was over. By 1815, the Barbary Wars were over. The United States had established itself as a major naval power in the Mediterranean. The American Navy had grown from just 4 ships in 1801 to 108 ships in 1815. In addition, the Navy had gained valuable experience in fighting against a major power. The sailors and officers of the United States Navy had proven themselves to be equal to the challenge. They had defeated the Tripolitans and established peace with the Tunisians and Algerians. The Barbary Wars were an important chapter in the history of the United States Navy. They were the first time that the Navy was deployed overseas. They were also the first time that the Navy fought against a major power. The wars established the United States as a major naval power in the Mediterranean. They also helped to grow the Navy from a small force of a few dozen ships to a major fleet of over 100 ships. Finally, the wars proved that the sailors and officers of the United States Navy were equal to the challenge of fighting against a major power. If you enjoyed this video, check out the playlist of previous episodes on the US Navy. If you want to learn more about the Barbary Wars, I would recommend checking out the history.com article on the subject. You can find a link to it below. I would also like to thank our supporters for their support. If you would like to support us, please consider becoming a supporter today. You can find a link to our support page below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.